Well, dear colleagues and friends, a very good afternoon to you. My name is John Clarke. I'm the Director for International Relations in DG Agriculture at the European Commission, and I'm delighted to be moderating this session today on the international dimension of GIs. Despite my nationality, I am actually a great appreciator of good quality food and drink. So I am a GI fan. Before we start, a word on the housekeeping. We have English and French two-way interpretation, so I invite you to use the interpretation button on the screen to get the language you want. Now, this two-day conference is mainly about strengthening the EU GI system, and because of that, you could be forgiven for thinking that GIs are mainly a European phenomenon. But as this session will illustrate, nothing can be further from the truth. GI development, GI protection has become, in the last decade in particular, a global phenomenon, and countries all over the globe are supporting producer groups, registering and enforcing GIs, and increasingly trying to get them protected in other parts of the world. And many countries, and in particular developing countries, have very rich cultural, culinary traditions and heritage, and they are literally, I would say, a fertile ground for the creation of GIs, with all the benefits that GIs brings to producers and the rural economy and the broader social fabric. So in this session, we're going to look at how GIs are being developed in other parts of the world, notably in Asia and Africa. We'll be looking at some of the success stories and some of the challenges involved in if you like, coaxing a GI like a shy nocturnal animal into the light of day. The challenges of running a sui generis GI regime, how producer groups can actually organize themselves, and how quality can be maintained over time. What is the role of the producer vis-a-vis the authorities? So a lot of interesting questions to be addressed, and the four distinguished speakers we have this morning or this afternoon now will also be drawing on the lessons that we can learn from the experience of creating and maintaining this rural intellectual property that we call the GI. So with that, I'm going to invite the first speaker. We had some issues about the order of the speakers, but I believe the first speaker will be it'll be a scene setter from EUIPO's very own Alvaro García Alcázar, who is the head of the EUIPO International Cooperation Division, and he will explain EUIPO's support and capacity building work around the world, activities aimed at generating a pro-GI culture in other countries and putting in place functioning GI protection systems, which of course is a big part actually in the conference theme of strengthening the EU's GI system. GI protection in other parts of the world is a big part of that. So Alvaro, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Good morning, everyone. Let us go straight to the point, and just let me say that I'm the team leader for the EU-funded projects, so not the head of the International Cooperation Service. But thank you for the promotion, John. I appreciate it. Just let me go through the main message that I would like to pass during this presentation. First of all, we, the European Union, we think that it's very important to strengthen the GI system outside of the European Union, across the world. We will try to explain why, and then we'll see how the EUIPO supports those efforts with the Commission. In theory, I can control this presentation, but it looks like I can't. So there you go. Well, first of all, let us see why or what the policymaker, the European Commission, is doing in this respect before coming to the benefits that we think that it has the GI system in Europe and outside the European Union. So first of all, the European Commission, the GAGRI, G-Trade, they engage into multilateral and bilateral agreements in order to obtain this administrative protection, this mutual recognition, so that the European GIs are recognized outside the European Union, and outside of the European Union, Mercosur GIs, for instance, they are recognized in the European Union. So you see there is a flexible process there, or more flexible than usual. It allows the coexistence with prior trademarks. It's ensuring the right of prior use, or right of use, sorry. And it creates an effective cooperation mechanism and dialogue between the European Union and countries, regions outside of the European Union. So in this respect, I think it's very important to talk about non-agricultural products. You will see that during the morning there were many conversations about it. I invite you to look at the European Parliament resolution. The Council of the European Union was on the 10th of November, and the IP action plan, which is going to be published very soon, because you will see that that it will affect the negotiations of the European Union with third parties. As you might know that many countries, such India, for instance, they do have a lot of non-agricultural products, GIs, and it's going to benefit this negotiation in the future. So let us go a little bit more in detail, since we don't have a lot of time, a little bit on the advantages of GIs, and in particular in the respect that we are working with. So in the project-based approach, or in the cooperation and development field. The first one is very economical. You can see that a registration of GIs can multiply the price of this GI, this product, up to 2.1 times, so it can be higher. But regardless of the type of product, and whether it's a long established or newly registered, in most cases, the premium is up to 20–50%. So clearly a very clear economic benefit. For the consumers, you have a guarantee of origin of the product, the quality of the product, the authenticity of the product, and most importantly, you have very good controls on the production side and in the market side. But not only that, I mean, you see that there are social economic benefits also for the society. It allows to maintain better jobs in often remote areas. It maintains economic activities in rural communities, and it leads potentially to job creation. So, and also on the other side of very green side of the European Union in the last times, GIs encourage the preservation of biodiversity, the local savoir-faire, and of course it favors the landscapes tourism. So you see why we think that working with GIs outside the European Union can benefit within the scope of development and cooperation. So let us now go a little bit of what or how the EUIPO is supporting these efforts of the European Commission. You will see that that we don't only work with GIs, we also work with trademarks, patents, copyrights, but basically we try to promote IPR robust systems outside the European Union. I will come later on particularities of the GIs activities that we do, of course, but I just wanted to let you know very quickly that the EUIPO, the European Union Intellectual Property Office, is supporting the efforts of the European Commission, the policymaker, in this endeavor, and it also co-funds these projects that we are working together outside the European Union. So, just a quick overview of where we are, very briefly. Latin America, China, Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean. So the European Union IP Office, we are implementing on behalf of the European Commission intellectual property projects outside the European Union, and we always embed a GI component. I will try to summarize very quickly what are the clusters of activities that we do on GIs. First of all, let me come up to the promotion of the GI system, very important for us. So we try to promote the advantages of the GI system. We have a couple of examples here. You see that Kampot Pepper, we supported the registration of Kampot Pepper in the European Union, and we were working with the association in the Penja Pepper very recently in order to favor that registration. So you see, we don't work on the value chain creation of these projects, of these GIs, we'd rather try to focus on the intellectual property part of it, so where we can add value. But not only that, of course, we also produce GI features, GI booklets, documentaries, and most importantly, we support the GI IP policies of third countries. So we come clear with our partners in third countries, we look at their priorities, we see where they might need support, and then we provide it. Another field of action on GIs, of course, it's the technical exchange of views. GIs are registered at European level by DG Agri. There are also member states which register GIs. So we try to work with non-EU IP offices in order to exchange best practice. It could be everything. It could be from the definition of requirements of registration, what is their definition of a geographical area, and what is the link to it, what are the critical success factors for registration of GIs. So we try to engage into a technical conversation in order to make the process more efficient, quicker, better for the benefit of the users. And then finally, the last field of activity that we work in this project-based approach is the capacity building, GI advice. Basically, we build capacity to the productive sector in order to compete in local and external markets. We do a lot of workshops, GIs for producers, IP advisors, attorneys. And one last thing that is very interesting and lastly is taking a lot of momentum is the advice on GI regulation, GI laws. The partners, they come to us, to the EUIPO, as a first point of contact in order to provide advice on how the GI regulation should be amended if needed. And we work very closely with the Commission, with DG Agri, with DG Trade, in order to build together input, useful input for this, for our partners outside the European Union. So just very quickly, these are our two main websites. If you want to know more about what we do, how we do it on GIs, but also non-GIs sector, please visit these web pages. So thank you very much, John. Back to you.
Many thanks, Alvaro, for a very succinct presentation. I think one of your strengths as an organisation is as a major intellectual property office, you have a lot of credibility with your counterparts around the world, with the IPR officers globally. Yeah, I think that's something a big value added that you present. You've also been very effective, I think, at discussing with the rest of the world the relationship between trademarks and GIs. I mean, EUIPO, you have a much bigger trademark history. GIs is a bit more recent, but I think you're doing a great service in actually clarifying that very muddy area and with our partners. And the last thing I would say was that you were right to note that your value added is essentially in the intellectual property dimension of GIs, and that you and we need to work together with other agencies, with the FAO, on the rural value chain aspect of GIs, which is a precondition, I think, for success in creating a GI. So many thanks for that first presentation, which I think sets the scene very well for our next speaker. And as I said, I believe that the next speaker will be from OAPI, Miss Magui Nnoko. No, my apologies. It's Delphine. Excuse me, Delphine Marie-Vivien. Delphine is a senior researcher at the Institute CIRAD. She is a world expert on GIs, and she has enormous experience, not only academically, but in the field, in the GI creation and development and protection, notably in Asia. And she's going to share with us some of her results of her research, of her field work on GIs, And I think she will, as even the title suggests, she'll demonstrate that there is still massive hidden potential in Asia, not least Southeast Asia, for further GI development to the benefit of producers and rural areas. So Delphine, over to you, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clarke. So I can take the control of the program. Yes, thank you very much for this nice introduction. So the presentation I'm going to deliver is focusing on Asia, but CIRAD, the research institute I'm working for, is also working on development of geographical indications in Africa. And we know well Mrs. Magui, working together on the developing GIs in West Africa. But just now we focus on what's happening in Asia and what are the successes in Asia and also the challenges to awakening sleeping GIs. So here you see some figures demonstrating the very dynamic protection of geographical indication in Asia, in ASEAN countries, but also non-ASEAN countries. Actually, most of those countries have introduced a GI sui generis system with a specification describing the characteristics of the product, method of production, geographical area, in the same way as in the EU. And they are registering a numerous amount of geographical indications, not only for agricultural products and foodstuff, but also handicraft goods, which, for example, in India, as Mr. Alvaro was saying, 2/3 of the GIs for non-food products, mainly the textile industry. So you see here the figures, quite impressive. Actually, I've just updated the data for China. It's more than 10,000 GIs now in China. And in Southeast Asia, you have Thailand, almost 150, Indonesia, the same amount, Vietnam, almost 100, Malaysia, Cambodia with a successful Kampot Pepper, and even Laos has its first GI. What is also interesting to see is that Asia is very dynamic in terms of negotiating and signing bilateral agreements, including chapters on geographical indications. Of course, there are many agreements signed with the EU, like China EU agreement, or Vietnam, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, of course. But you also see some agreements among Asian countries. So here, for example, the ASEAN-Japan one, and also signed with non-Asian countries. There's one agreement between Vietnam and Mexico dedicated to geographical indication. So not only the EU is active in terms of international protection, but also ASEAN countries. And then looking at the last international agreement on geographical indications, the Lisbon Agreement and the Geneva Act of 2015, the first signatory of that agreement was Cambodia, a country in Asia. So very dynamic protection in those countries. Here's some pictures showing the diversity of product, including handicraft products. You see the silk from Thailand in the bottom left. And you have salt from Indonesia, Bali, Darjeeling tea, beef from Japan, Kobe beef, etc. The Kampot Pepper, of course. And you see on the right part of the slide, the national GI logos in those countries. So most of those countries have enacted a national GI logo to promote all the GIs from their own country in a similar way as the EU does with the 2 PDOP GIs logo. So here, if we start with the success story, let's start with good news before looking at the challenges. Well, the most successful story in Asia is, of course, this Kampot Pepper, at least if we look at the export market. And there are also some successful stories for the domestic market. But here, for a product which is exported, Kampot Pepper is really a real success story with an increase of price, which was maintained in spite of a sharp decrease of price worldwide. You see here on the left part of the slide that the black pepper, which is the most common pepper, is still sold at a price of $15. That's the price at the farm gate included now, whereas the regular pepper from Cambodia, but it's more or less the same prices for pepper from other Asian countries, Vietnam or Indonesia, has dropped drastically until being now less than $2 per kilogram. So thanks to the geographical indication, the pepper from Kampot managed to maintain such a high price. I mean, it's 10 times more the price of the regular pepper. And I'm just talking about the black pepper. If you look at the red pepper or the white pepper, it's even more expensive. And then the final price for the consumer price is really high. It's one of the most expensive price in the world, together with the Panja pepper from Cameroon that was mentioned before by Mr. Alvaro. And then looking also at the number of producers, it's interesting to see that there's an increasing numbers of producers joining the organization. So here in Cambodia, it's mandatory, like in the EU, to have management and registration of the GI by a producers organization. Actually, this GI was set up through AFD, French Development Agency project, which has supported the registration of the GI in 2010 in Cambodia. And so it was really a system very much based on the European perception that producers' organizations are at the core of GI management. And looking at the recent figures, you see that the numbers is increasing, included for small producers. You also, of course, have now big investors coming to Kampot and who are increasing the volumes produced, but even the small producers are increasing as members of the organization. Still, there is some challenges if we have a full picture at the ASEAN way of protecting geographical indications. Actually, by law, in most of the ASEAN countries, the applicant can be both a government institution, local authority, or a producers group. So we have this dual nature of the applicant. And indeed, in practice, the majority of the geographical indications are filed by government institutions, usually the local authorities, provincial authorities close to the product. So this means that in Asia, the way for protecting GI is really a state-driven top-down process. Is it a problem as such? We could say, no, it's important to have the state involved in GI protection. I mean, at the EU level, we have also strong state involvement to support producers. But still, it's important to have producers involved, at least, because the specification needs to be based on their practices. And this is not always happening in Asian countries. Because those producers are not enough involved, they don't even know there is a GI registered on their product. And then the specifications are drafted by experts and not always based on their practices. They might be too complicated for producers to really understand what has to be done, what is authorized or not. And what is more striking is that there's very few collective GI organizations of producers managing GIs in Asian countries. So it means that the picture is that finally we have, for many of those numerous GIs registered, you have seen the numbers in the first slide, a lack of use and control of those geographical indications. So we could say that those GIs are sleeping GIs like the Sleeping Beauty. But still, I'm sure they will awake quite soon. Just here an example to show you for one case in Vietnam, what the situation is. So you see here the name of the GI is Orange Khao Phong. Khao Phong is a district in northern Vietnam. And on the right of the name, you see the logo, the product logo, what we call the product logo, which is to identify those GI products. Actually, because in Vietnam by law, the GI belongs to the state. So in Vietnam, you cannot even have a GI applied by a producers group. Here, the GI was registered by the district and the province. And then the producers are quite confused about what is a GI. They understand the GI is the logo and not the name Khao Phong. And they understand this has been registered by the local authorities. So it belongs to local authorities and is not for them to be used. And so what you see on the market is many oranges sold with the name Orange Khao Phong. But those oranges are not controlled, so they do not necessarily comply with the GI specification. They are not controlled before commercialization at the plantation, at the farmer's place, and they're not controlled either in the markets. And then finally, the name Orange Khao Phong is left free to all. There's no enforcement on the geographical indication. There's only enforcement on the logo, this product logo, Khao Phong. So this raises quite some issue because actually it's a very nice product, very good orange, very expensive. Why isn't it more successful? And what is difficult in countries like Asia is that it's difficult to control names that, of course, like for any geographical indication, are used in the market before the GI registration. By principle, GI should already be used in the market, have a reputation. So for enforcement agency, it's difficult for them to consider they should refuse the use of that name to producers. So the temptation from the control bodies is to only control the products which are using the GI product logo or the GI national logo. This is the case in Thailand, for example. Another example where the control is only on products bearing the Thai national GI logo. And finally, leave the use of the name free. And why do they do like this? Because those producers, processors were not really involved in elaborating the GI. So it looks quite unfair and difficult to exclude them for using the name. But then by, having this situation, it weakens a lot the concept of geographical indication, which is first of all a name designated a link between a product's quality reputation as its origin. And if now the name is used for any kind of product, including low quality product, the mere concept of GI is lost. So it's really important that in Asia, there's a consideration of including producers and protecting the name because the right is legitimate. So you see, for Asian countries, the consequences of this situation is that they really need to reinforce the role of value chain stakeholders and put them at the core of GI management. And not only individual stakeholders, but collective organizations. So then there's a need to set up a GI collective management organization of producers. That's always a tricky issue. It's always complicated, especially this criteria of representativeness of all the beneficiaries of the GI. It's important that this collective management organization represents all the beneficiaries. So then questions comes like who should be a member, which voting right, is it one man, one vote, or is it according to the volume? Who is member? If we look at the example of the Kampot Pepper Promotion Association, well, not only the producers are members, but also the first exporters are members, which is easier for traceability, but where's also some issues if exporters had to decide about the GI specification. But what is interesting in that case is that the Department of Intellectual Property under the Ministry of Commerce of Cambodia participate to all the meetings of the association, which in a way facilitates the mediation between various stakeholders and help supporting difficulties. They also have difficulties of frauds, like any geographical indications, frauds coming from the area of origin itself. And then a very important principle, and the EU is supporting this very strongly in all the bilateral agreements, is to have non-discriminatory membership to the organization. The only criteria should be the compliance with GI specification. But we see in some countries like Indonesia and some GIs, Vietnam as well, that being member of the GI association means that small producers need to sell their production to the organization. But not only small producers, but also any producer, even the big one, if they want to use the GI, in some GI association, it is provided that they should sell their product to the GI association. But of course, this is a discriminatory criteria of membership. Membership should be only based on the compliance with the GI specification, and any actor of the value chain shall be able to have its own markets and be able to trade its product on its own, depending on its strategy. So there's also sometimes some confusion in Asia between the role of a cooperative, which is there to trade, which is an actor of the value chain, and the role of a GI association, which is to represent all the interests of the value chain actors. Then what will be the consequences for the EU? Because we are in a seminar linked to the EU policy. Well, actually, the EU is very active with Asian countries, negotiating many FTAs and also registering many GIs coming from foreign countries, in particular from Asia. So I don't know whether it will be possible for the EU, so here the DG Agri, to examine the nature of the applicant, its representativeness, whether this is feasible or not, whether this is desirable or not, whether it's really possible to examine the control mechanism, but in real, whether it's before or after commercialization. Also, the EU can really check that the GI is used in the market, but then the GI means really the name and not only the product logo. So that's quite open questions, and to see whether the EU could support a better implementation of GIs in Asia. Of course, there's a very important reflection on the object of protection that was mentioned by Alvaro, that no, sorry, the last point by Alvaro. The second point is on this logo issue, which is also a discussion in the EU. The GI is a name, the logo is for promotion. Why do we have such a confusion in Asia? But apparently there's also some issues in Europe. If we see the numerous non-compliance of lack of use of the EU PDO PGI's logo when the frauds authorities in the EU member state are doing the checks. It's one of the major breaches, actually, the lack of use of the logo. So it's important to have logo for promotion, but still it should be important to remind that the protection is on the name, and especially in Asian countries. And then, of course, the last challenge for the EU is to see how to give protection of these numerous Asian GIs on handicraft products. So I'm very happy to see that there's been a new step in this from last November. So let's hope it will work one day to have a GI for handicraft products protected in the EU. And then just my conclusions. So that we have famous Asian GI success stories which are successful, even though there are still some sleeping beauties. Actually, this top-down straight-driven process is important here because it enables to compensate for the weak tradition of self-governance of value chain stakeholders. So I think this is necessary at the beginning of the GI process in Asian countries, the time stakeholders know about GI. And indeed, if we look at the history in France, the first appellation of origins were defined by the states. It was a failure, but that was the first governance of geographical indication in France. Then one of the options for Asian countries, especially in Asian legislation or regulations, implementing the legislation would be to maybe provide for mandatory creation of a collective organization of producers within a short period after the GI is registered, if it is not possible at the time of the registration of the GI. Actually, I was just in another seminar this morning in Asia, and the Vietnamese IP law is going to be amended to give more role to the Producers Association. So that's a good news. And then the last point is how the EU can play a role in strengthening Asian GI. I leave the answers to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delphine. That was an absolutely fascinating presentation. You stimulated, I think, many questions that will come up in the next hour or minutes. I take from your presentation many messages, which the audience will also take. I think one is the heterogeneity, the massive variation across Asia of GI systems, regimes, approaches. There is no Asian approach on GIs. First of all, everyone's very different. Secondly, the relationship that you made between the producer groups and the state, very interesting. We saw this in China when I negotiated the EU GI agreement with China. For some GIs, the state has a very prominent role. For other GIs, it's the farmers. Yeah. And no consistent approach, but I think that the message you make is a very good one. That it's of interest to really strengthen the role and the viability of the producer groups, so that they are de facto independent from the authorities who control them. I think that is the trend, and I think you made that point very well. A third point I would draw from your fantastic presentation is that given the activity in Asia on GIs, they need to be very aware or beware of the anti-GI strategy of the United States. The USA is trying to dismantle GI protection around the world. Yeah, and I think that's very negative and very damaging, and not in the interests of all of the farmers, food producers, traditional craft producers, owners of traditional knowledge in Asia or other parts of the world. Yeah, so I would encourage all the Asian listeners today to be very aware of Greeks bearing gifts, as Homer said. You didn't mention India very much in your presentation, but India is a very big player in the Asian GI scene, and I think we could develop that theme later on. And then my last point would be that you gave some statistics on the number of GIs in each country in Asia, or many countries, 7,000 plus in China. That's quite amazing. So I take from that in China, and my good friend Li Hue from Knipa is I think watching this, is in this seminar today. China invented, the wheel, fireworks, printing, golf, but also GIs. So I think we have to take off our hat. I have a Colombian GI hat, which I'll wear, but I'll take off in a moment to thank, to say, pay tribute, I would say. Latin America is not on the panel today. To pay tribute to the many Asian countries who are really understanding that GIs are a really very valuable part of their rural development policy and giving more income to farmers and maintaining traditions in rural areas. So Delphine, many thanks for a fascinating presentation. I would like to have a date with you on a future occasion to talk about GIs in Asian countries in more depth, but that's for another occasion. Thank you again.
Thank you to you.
Very good. Okay, so we now, I have the pleasure now of introducing Magui Nnoko, who is a senior director of OAPI, the Organisation Africaine de la Propriété Intellectuelle, which is a regional organization responsible for IPR in the 20 or more countries that are members of OAPI. I'm very happy to say that Magui and I know each other very well. She has been a fantastic colleague working with me and with other colleagues to develop the Pan-African GI strategy. And I think there is nobody in the world, frankly, better placed than Magui Nnoko to explain and to present the work of OAPI in strengthening GI protection and development in Africa, and again drawing on some important success stories in that region. So, dear Magui, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clarke, for your lovely introduction. It's a pleasure, John, to see you again, even through this virtual way. And good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for OAPI to participate to this forum. We have been invited to share our experience in terms of strengthening geographical indication. Or what we're representing will be what we're really facing day by day with the producer around the various projects that we are managing. And first of all, as John said, it seems important for us . Thank you. Please. Hello?
Yes, Magui, now you are again back. So if you can please repeat the couple of last remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just thanking John for the word that he pronounced to introduce OAPI, and greeting everybody and presenting OAPI, saying that we are just here to share our experience in terms of supporting GIs in our various member states. So we'll have a short presentation on the sharing of experience of OAPI regarding the GI. And I wish to have the control of the presentation if it is possible. Can I? Okay. Good. I think I went too far. Okay, so OAPI is, first of all, as John said, a regional office in terms of supporting and protecting industrial or property titles, and we are covering 17 member states. We have one specificity is that we have a uniform law. That means that if a GI have been registered in one of the country in among the 17 countries constituting OAPI, the GI will be automatically be protected in the 16 other countries. And you have here the presentation of the various countries that are members of OAPI. What is interesting too in OAPI, it is the area and the perspective related to that very large area. So OAPI is quite a potential of 185 million of consumers with a rich variety of products that can be supported in terms of GI. And this is one of the elements that have been enlightened in the vision that is pursuing actually by the Director General of OAPI, that is to make OAPI a modern and efficient intellectual property office at the service of the development of member states. We should understand by that behind the strategic plan 2018-2022, we really promote the use of the strategical use of IP to support the development of member states. And geographical indication are one of the elements that we really use efficiently to support those member states. We started in 2013. Here you have a short presentation of some of the GI, some of the products that have been supported by OAPI or that are in process. We entered the adventure of GI in 2008 with the support of the French Agency of Development, AFD, and behind the project PAMPIG, with the support of CIRAD too, we went to the first OAPI GIs that were Kampot Pepper that Marie-Vivien was presenting, and Oku White Honey of Cameroon, those two products, the coffee, Ziama Center of Guinea. Those three products were the first GI register in OAPI, GI coming from member states. We have the pleasure to announce that since this year too, we have a new one that is a pineapple and an apple de sucre of Benin that is really a good other product. With the success of the first PAMPIG, the first project that was supporting GI in OAPI, we continue with the French agency to support other products. And actually 5 products under technical study. We have the pineapple Baron de Guinea, the red cocoa of Cameroon. We have the Gari of Benin, Acheketu. Those are products transformed from cassava. And we have one handicraft product too, that is pine baule that you can see here in the presentation. And with the PAMPIG project, with the success that have been registered with it, OAPI by himself is supporting other products that are under registration, products coming from Mali, from Niger, and another handicraft product coming from Burkina Faso. They call it Chapeau de Saponi. It's not a, it is a particular hat that have more than 300 years of existence. So those 4 other products are under a registration process in OAPI. So behind all these products, OAPI is really giving support in various areas. We support the formulation of GI technical documents with the experts in our various member states. We promote geographical indication coming from our member state too, and we really work on capacity building too. Marie-Vivien was saying it, one of the key issues of GI is to have people in the various countries be able to support the GI, to understand the process of GI, and really to promote the GI. Is why we build a program of capacity building that we call African GI training with the support of CIRAD. And we had the first edition last year. Because of the COVID, we could not carry the second one this year, but we'll continue. It's a very, very interesting program that is giving skills to producers, but also to stakeholders which are supporting the GI process. Of course, when you register, the GI is not the end. And we notice it after the first registration of the 3 main products. We still need to support them to have a sustainable product. So inside our project too, we bring that support to member states. What do we learn from some of the products that we register actually? What we are presenting now is the Kampot Pepper that have been enlightened by Marie-Vivien and I think by Sergio too. Kampot Pepper is one of the best product that we really had inside this process of registration. As you can see, we have the 4 quality of Kampot Pepper: the black, the red, the white, and the green. What is really interesting in that product is the way the product have quietly increased in terms of price during the process. Just to try to illustrate, before the registration of GI, we were quietly at 3.7 euro for a kilogram of GI, but actually the producer can have 22 or 18 euro per kilogram when they are selling their GI product. It was really a success for the producer. Another impact too is the incomes that really increase for the farmers. And the fact that they are really interested actually to develop that GI. Each year we have something like 25 to 50 new hectares of Kampot Pepper that are planted in the area of GI. We should also enlighten the jobs that have been created around this product. Today, we are quite to more than 1,500 people that are working around the GI. And we can't close this chapter without enlightening the fact that there's a more market that have been opened with the GI product. And of course, the registration, more market in Europe and in East Africa, where they're exporting the GI. And we can't close the chapter without enlightening the fact that because of the interest of the GI, the file is actually under the registration process in EU. That means that it was really a good product. We can talk about the white honey too, and you will see that the white honey too has a different process, but of course, we also notice the fact that there was a real progress from 2 euro the kilogram before the registration to 11 euro actually that they are selling the white honey. But what it's very interesting, what is, I don't know if it is interesting or damageable, Marie-Vivien was saying that, is that if in some other the sellers are selling it around 26 euro. So the kilograms. So we'll see that sometimes a producer, those who are really gaining more are not always producer. But what is interesting is that the demand is higher and higher. We did not highlight here the Ziama coffee, But what we should know is that the Ziama coffee too, before the registration, it was less than 14 euro. Actually, it's 20 euro. But the difficulties, we'll see it among the challenges, is that there is not a real differentiation between the coffee that is Ziama coffee as GI and the normal coffee. So regarding the prices are quite similar. And all those elements, you will understand it behind the challenges that are faced by all those GI groups. The first challenge is the human resources. And among the human resources, we really have the problem of leadership and animation of the group. You will see that some GI group of producers, they have more success than others because of the leadership of the person who is really managing the group. And sometimes it's not evident for producers to have it. Finding retaining committed members in the process is not easy too, because a lot of are leaving the group. Marketing and promotion of the product. You will see that compared to the product in other areas, here we have a more progressive development, because by DI they learn how to promote their product, and it was not the case before the registration, but they still have challenge how to present the product. And other challenges are related to finance, to financial resources, how to support the internal and external control, how to fight against counterfeiting, and how to have a sustainable budget that will help them to promote all the area of the environment of the GI. So lesson learned for a successful GI according to what we have just presented. One of the lessons that we learned is that to have a good product, it needs to be very specific with his quality, with his quality and his specificities, very known and appreciated by consumers. If not, it will be very, very difficult. The technical specifications of the GI should be drawn up in a participatory and structured manner, so that all the producers should be involved on the drawing of the technical specification and in the control plan, so that at the end they should be involved. A strong GI group too, as we said, is a dynamic leader and animator. It's a group that integrates the producer, but even the seller, so that the remunerations which will have an equity treatment. A dynamic branding, of course, marketing, and a strong defense strategy, because a lot of them are suffering for counterfeiting. And a realistic and economic model for the GI group, and the support, very, very important, of public authorities. Without that support, it will be difficult for a GI to stay after some time. So those are some of the elements that I wanted to enlighten in this short time. I really hope that I succeed to present you some element regarding this DI, and I'm available to have all your questions that you can have. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, dear Maggie, thank you very much for that brilliant presentation, frankly. I think that last slide is really important in terms of lessons that you've learned, and that can be translated to others, can be shared with others. Yeah, I think the key issue that you've highlighted, honestly, is the fundamental importance of producer groups being organised and being together as a group to create and present and monitor and develop their GI. I was in a conference yesterday where the Swiss government discussed the same issue, and they made their law, if you like, is that the producer group must represent at least 60% of the producers. Yeah, that was their view on what would be a democratic kind of representation of the producer group. Yeah, but I think you fixed on a very important problem there, a very important issue. I think also you made the point at the end that it's not only protection that's important, it's also promotion and the marketing, yeah? And I think we're all very keen to help with the marketing and promotion of GIs coming from the Kampot Pepper or other African GI producers. In your last slide, you talked about the GI producers being realistic on the economics. I think that's fair enough. But I think, as we saw in the case of Asia, there is enormous untapped potential in Africa, and not least in West Africa for GIs, not only in agriculture and food, but also perhaps even more in non-agri GI products. Yeah, I remember having a very interesting discussion with Denis Bohusu, the head of OAPI, when I first met him, who showed me the massive range of textile designs produced by traditional craft methods, which are not replicable anywhere in the world. And he was saying to me, this is what we can do in the future on GIs. The non-agri GIs will be as important as the agri ones. And I completely agree with that. Yeah. And I hope that Africa will put some pressure on the European Union to make us put in place a regime in Europe for non-agri GI protection, because I think that is good for Europe, it's good for Africa and for the rest of the world. So again, Magui, thank you very much. I hope to see you in reality, not just virtually, in the next few months to continue our Pan-African GI strategy work together. I'm now going to move to our last, but certainly not least, participant, Miss Marthane Swart, who is the director of the South African Rooibos Council. This is another great GI, Rooibos. It's something I drink myself every couple of days. It was one of the first. It was the first African GI to be registered in the European Union. So again, I think it's a real success story. And the presentation, I think, from Marthane will actually explain, how her council, how South Africa was able to create or make this a GI, get it protected in South Africa, in the SADC region, in the European Union and elsewhere, and what lessons from that success story can be applied to other interested GI producer groups. So I'll stop there and give the floor to Marthane Swart. Please, Marthane.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for. It is a little bit. There we go. All right. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction about the product of Rooibos for those of you who do not know. So my name is Marthane, and I'm from the South African Rooibos Council. So Rooibos is grown, if you look at the southern tip of Africa in the PowerPoint slide there, and if you look towards the left of your screen, I indicated with some red. So that is really the only place in the world where Rooibos tea is grown. So it's a very narrow 60,000 hectare belt in the mountains in the Western Cape of South Africa. Rooibos is grown in a biome, we call it a fynbos biome. So it is UNESCO World Heritage Site. And even though the area has less than 0.5% of Africa, it is home to 20% of its flora. So it is a really very rich flora, and it is a very important part of our GI and a very important part of when we developed it to also protect the products, but also very much this rare area where it grows. It is identified as one of the world's 35 biodiversity hotspots. And I think it is certainly in South Africa, we have many species, a plethora of species that occurs in this area. And Rooibos is one of the very few, along with Buchu, I don't know who is familiar, that has successfully transitioned to cultivation. And it's one of the very few economically important fynbos plants. And for that reason, very important for us to protect. I would like to move on to the next slide. It seems that I can't do it from here. If somebody can assist me. Too far. Okay, good. So for the Rooibos Council, I'm not going to dwell long on the work that we do, but you will see the words that I highlighted, because it is a small resource in volume comparatively in the tea industry internationally, really small volume, but really special product. We really want to promote and grow the market for the resource and awareness about the resource and its properties, but very important to protect the resource and the area where it comes from. And GI has really been for us a key component and a key focus area for a very long time to enhance this protection that we can give to our indigenous resource. Then also responding to threats and crises. In my next slide, you will see why it became so important for us as a small industry from South Africa to have GI protection. And then also the last thing that I just want to briefly is to disseminate the relevant information. And this is both for our local population and for the international consumers of Rooibos. In the local market, the awareness of GI is very low. So this is one of the next steps we will take in time. But yeah, I will speak to that a little bit later. So why are GIs important? So in 1994, there was a company called Forever Young that registered Rooibos as a trademark in the United States. And trademarks are often registered, and we are aware of this. But what then happened is the lady who owned the trademark prohibited totally companies who wanted to use the name of the word Rooibos. So the South African government and one of the members of the Rooibos Council called Rooibos Limited then jointly worked together, and they won a court case against Forever Young, and the trademark was deregistered, and the name of Rooibos could be freely used. By the same token, there was a French company, the Trucy, and they attempted to register in 2013 the exclusive right to use the words of Rooibos in France. So again, we became aware of it, and we filed an observation with the French Trademark Authority, and then this was also debunked. But you can think for a small industry, that is, we are fortunate that we are fairly well resourced, but if you're not so well resourced to take on international court cases and to deal with international governments and to really build the muscle to do this, can be quite challenging. And in that, the GI just gives a wonderful barrier of protection for your product that gives you a very strong base to move from if you have to do this kind of engagement. Then I just want to very briefly speak about the process. So there's a lot of research that went before the registration of the GI, and you will see I start with 2006, and the South African Rooibos Council. The South African Rooibos Council really focused on deciding that we want to pursue the GI, and then this was part of a project for the Juros project, and then the initial report on the GI was published, and then a final report was published. We're a little bit pressed for time, so just excuse me if I'm rushing through this. And eventually that whole process led to the GI being protected in South Africa. And because of the GI then being protected in South Africa, there was, I think Delphine spoke to the importance of these bilateral agreements. There was the South African, the EPA agreement, so the Economic Partnership Agreement between South Africa and the EU. And we were really fortunate under this bilateral agreement to get protection for Rooibos. Then we decided, well, it is good to have it, but we also want to, if people are searching on the EU register, to come up on the EU register. So in January 2018, we started this process, and we've received extraordinary support from the EU Commission in our own country, in Pretoria, also from the EU Commission Review Committee, and we are now in the final stages where we have put this out to comment to the member states of the EU, and we received opposition, but I think opposition is really the wrong word. We received commentary more from the UK and the Swiss tea associations, And we met with them, facilitated by the EU Commission after, and these discussions were extraordinarily valuable in assisting us to understand EU regulation and how to position further our application. Okay, so lessons learned, very important to have a very strong industry collaboration. And I think a persistent attitude is needed, because you mustn't give up. You must just respond to everything that is, all the feedback that is coming your way. You need to identify sources of support, so both in your own country and internationally. And then you really need to work on building your relationship with your EU counterparts, because they are really valuable in assisting you. And also good to have a knowledge of EU requirements. If you do not have this in your own organization, then try to find a lawyer or somebody that can assist you. What we're going to do next is we're also going to look further than the EU to further protect our GI and our product. And we're going to focus on local awareness, because as I mentioned, even though GI is a very well understood concept in the EU, not so much in South Africa. Thank you. John, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's hard to know how to where to start, frankly. That was a fantastic presentation, you know, we take many things from this. One is that GIs cannot be invented out of nowhere; they have to be there and developed. I thought the presentation was very interesting on the trademark GI relationship. Marthane gave some very good examples of the difficulties of trademark challenges to GIs. Thirdly, I was happy that, sorry, I'm moving the screen a bit, that Marthane recognised that we are the first region outside South Africa, I think, to protect Rooibos, which we do, along with some other great South African GIs like Karoo lamb and many wines, of course, from South Africa. And it would be good to know from Marthane if there's any plan for your country to join the Geneva Act of the Lisbon Agreement. Yeah, I think that that could give a lot of additional scope to get your fantastic GIs recognised in a kind of one-stop shop, if you like, in many countries of the world, including the EU. Yeah, so I think that's something that I would invite you to think about. What else? No, I think those are the main things I take from that presentation. I was very happy. I was the negotiator of the SADC agreement for the EU, and I was very happy with the outcome on GIs. I think it was really, you know, cliche win-win. You know, we had a very good deal, and the proof is of the pudding's in the eating. There's been a massive expansion of trade between South Africa and Europe on GI products in the last 5 years. Yeah. And your products are really appreciated on the European market, and I just hope that you can actually coax out of the undergrowth, as it were, more products which have GI potential, get them protected in South Africa, and get them protected in Europe in a second step. So many thanks for that fantastic presentation, which is, you know, I think for the audience is really interesting because it's a practical example of a success story, a lot of years of work and developing the specifications and so on. But I think it's a very good example of what can be done and how you can actually put money in the pockets of farmers, which is in the end of the day what it's all about. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Marthane, for that presentation.
Thank you.
So I think we're probably at the end of our seminar, our session. It would be very impetuous of me to try to sum up what was a very, very complicated, rich, diverse set of presentations. I will simply maybe make three points. The first point is please contact the presenters for more information. Read their PowerPoints, read what they've done in research. We had 4 world experts today on GIs, and I think we need to really use that wonderful human resource that they've offered to us. Secondly, I think there was a very big emphasis today on the importance of helping producer groups to identify themselves, to coalesce, to coexist, and to develop themselves the GI specifications and system, which they will then present to the authorities. We've learned that in Asia, sometimes the line between public and private is blurred, but nonetheless, I think the key message is that we are really in the hands of producer groups, and we have to help them as government authorities to organize themselves, as we do with cooperatives. Yeah, so I think that is really an important message that came through the presentations. And the third message is that the GIs are really global, international. As I rather frivolously said a few minutes ago, you know, China is probably now claiming it invented GIs along with golf and fireworks and the wheel and many other things. I don't mind. It doesn't matter. The point is that, you know, every part of the world is pro GI, and I think that needs to be encouraged. It is a well-established formal IPR concept, recognized since the 19th century, and we need to promote it. Now, I'm looking at the clock. I don't know whether we have time for questions. I hope we have. Perhaps the organizer of the session can tell me whether we have time for any questions. I had quite a few coming through on the chat line, so please tell me.
Mr. Clarke, yeah, actually we have requested a bit of extension so we can allow the debate, since this is very important. So, okay. So I think we can just ask the speakers to be brief in their answers, so we can take some questions. Thank you.
Okay, I've received a number of questions from in the chat box and elsewhere, and the first one is from Mr. Kartit from the Moroccan IPR agency. Who is asking about you know, who is responsible in a national system to approve GI specifications. Mr. Carter, do you want to elaborate on that, or do we throw the question to the panelists?
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Oui, M. Cartier a posé la question, qui est responsable pour définir et vérifier les critères pour une IG? C'est les groupes de producteurs ou c'est les autorités nationales ou entre les deux? Donc, je peux peut-être demander à Delphine de répondre à cette question-là.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Kartik. I understood it was on the administration responsible for the recognition of specification. Because GIs were really internationalized through the TRIPS agreement, which is an agreement on intellectual property under the World Trade Organization. In most of the Asian countries, it's under the IP office or organization or department of the Ministry of Commerce. But still, in some countries like Japan, China, South Korea, it is the Ministry of Agriculture who is in charge of recognizing geographical indications. But that's not the majority of cases. Let's say it's really now under the IP umbrella. And it's also why because we also have many non-food products protected as geographical indications.
Un grand merci, Delphine. J'espère que M. Cartier est satisfait avec votre...
C'est from Nnoko, yeah.
We have received a second question from Mr. Harrison, Robert Harrison. Are you there? From the Austrian Business in Europe. Would you like to pose your question or what? Perhaps you could now. Are you there, Mr. Harrison? It seems not. So his question was, what we do with these companies or individuals who emigrated to Australia or New Zealand or the USA or Canada in the past and took with them their production of feta or gorgonzola or other cheeses, and particularly dairy products, and the producers today in Australia or US are worried that they will lose the protection of their names due to EU free trade agreements. I think this is a question more for me actually than from the panelists, but I think probably maybe our Asian colleagues will want to come in on this. At the end of the day, every country decides on whether to protect or not a name as a GI. It's the territoriality principle of IPR. So if the term feta or gorgonzola is regarded as generic in Bolivia or Laos or Cameroon, so be it. If, however, that name is still associated with a European legitimate producer, then it should be protected. So I think we apply always the TRIPS agreement rules on territoriality. But I would invite Delphine or Magui or others to come in on this one. It's a very big issue in international trade. I think on the EU side we have a good story to tell on this. We insist that our partners apply the territoriality principle, which they do, and the result is that in most cases our GIs are protected. In some cases, Mercosur, Chile, Mexico, we recognize freely that certain terms, Parmesano, etc., have become localized, and we accept that.
Yes, maybe I can just elaborate on that. Thank you very much, Mr. Clarke. If we look at the EU-Vietnam free trade agreements, it's true there is quite some numbers of exceptions of protection of European GIs for businesses who had already entered into the Vietnamese market, especially from Australia and New Zealand, which are quite close to Vietnam and exporting a lot of dairy products in Vietnam. And those who have been in a good phase already exporting their product will be allowed to continue doing so. So it's a kind of, it will not prevent anyway the authentic GI producers to export their product to Vietnam using their GI, but there will be a kind of coexistence. So that's a complex issue. But what I'd also like to highlight here is that even in the USA or Australia, there are some local products. And the producers there are also asking for a high level of protection of their own GIs. If you look at the Napa Valley wine from California, they have been suing those doing the bottling of the grapes, of grapes coming from outside the Napa Valley. There were bottling industries settled in Napa, importing grapes from other regions of the United States and calling the wine Napa Valley. And the producers, the wine producers of the US have sued against those companies, and they won the case in front of the Supreme Court of California. So it also means that GI is not only for European product, it's for local product anywhere in the world. And if you speak to American producers, local communities, they want to have also protection of their GIs. And I was just talking about Napa Valley, but you have Idaho potatoes, Kona coffee. I mean, there are many GIs. So there's also a difference in those countries between the big dairy industries, which indeed exports a lot of imitation of European cheese, and other industries in the US who do have local products. And they're asking for the same protection as in the EU, actually.
Yeah. No, very, very good points. I think that there is a growing interest in the USA and in New Zealand and Australia, certainly, definitely, and Chile, new world countries to develop their own GIs and not piggyback or free ride on European names. And there's no need for them to do that. Okay, I'm looking at the other questions we have. We have some questions from Mr. Pierre Boulanger. Does the RECEP agreement have GI implications? The short answer is no, it doesn't. And another question from him, if I go down, is there going to be a GI regime within the African Free Trade Area? And I would pass that to Magui, I guess, who is better placed than me to talk about that one.
Thank you, John. Maybe I will answer in French. À la question de Monsieur Boulanger, il est important de savoir qu'actuellement, l'accord de libre-échange continental vise à faciliter la circulation des biens et des produits, que ce soit les produits physiques ou alors les produits matériels. Et dans ce contexte-là, il y a tout un protocole en matière de propriété intellectuelle qui est sous négociation, dont les négociations vont commencer à partir de l'année prochaine. Bien entendu, l'objectif étant de faciliter la circulation des produits, toutes les questions de propriété intellectuelle seront abordées et probablement celles des indications géographiques aussi, étant donné que dans beaucoup de pays, on a les régimes de protection des IG et on a aussi des régimes de protection des marques collectives. Donc, bien entendu que, au même titre que les autres droits de propriété intellectuelle, la question des IG sera éventuellement abordée. Sous quel angle doit-il être pris en considération dans l'accord de libre-échange? On va laisser les négociations pouvoir en décider avec la volonté des États, bien entendu, qui vont implémenter ça.
Dear Maggie, many thanks for that extremely comprehensive and good reaction. I think you're on a very good track, frankly, on GI development and protection in OAPI in your region. I'm going to open the floor now to any other questions. Time has probably run out, but if there's one last question from the participants, or through the chat room, I need to look at the chat room quickly, see anything new. Please let me know.
Dear participants, if there is one last question, just use your raised hand option, please. And yeah.
I don't see any questions, to be honest. If there are any, please raise your hand. But if not, we'll stop there. And I want to thank our four really brilliant panelists who have, shared with us. In the end, probably, I don't want to guess their ages, 60 years of knowledge between them on GI development and protection and marketing. I think their PowerPoint presentations were superb, and the lessons learned, which was a feature of every presentation, I think will be very, very useful for any potential GI producing group in the future, as well as for governments. And I think this session will have really given us a lot of food for thought on a number of issues. One, the economic value of GIs, the value in terms of rural development and empowering smallholders, especially in developing countries. Secondly, what is the right relationship between the farmers and the public authorities, and thirdly, the importance of internationalizing GI rules, regimes, protection. We have the many free trade agreements around the world, EU has many, in which GIs are an important feature. The ASEAN countries, Asia has many. We've just done a fantastic agreement with China in the last few weeks. That's only one of many. And I think there is a very good momentum, in fact, in the FTA world towards recognizing GIs, and that needs to be done on a very high level of protection. Yeah. And lastly, I would end with an encouragement and a plea, if you like, to all of the listeners and audience to look again at the newly negotiated Lisbon Treaty in the WIPO, the United Nations Treaty to multilateralize GI protection. This is quite an extraordinary, unique opportunity. In one shot, one application, you can get your GI recognized at very low cost, 500 euros, in many countries. Yeah, in the moment, countries representing 600 million people. So I would end with a plea to all of you to look at the Lisbon Agreement as a very good multilateral route to promoting GIs. So I'll stop here. Thank you to the panelists. You were brilliant. I hope and I'm sure that your presentations will be shared. And thank you to EUIPO for organising this very interesting session and to getting really involved and committed to the GI aspect of the IPR world. Yeah, it's been in the darkness for too long. I think with this conference, GIs are really taking centre stage as part of our global agricultural and rural development policy. So thank you again, and thanks to the panelists, thanks to the audience for the questions, and I will switch off now. I'm sure there's another session coming up on an unrelated subject, so I will bow out now. Thank you so much.